with society and sustainability too. My English is not so perfect, so I have to speak slowly, and it will be better when you answer me your questions even slowly. I'm not used to hold lectures in English, but I try to give my very best. Yes, and I hope to show you the main thoughts, the main item, and the perspective is subsistence, and to look at the whole economy, to look at reproduction, and to foster other economy forms. Another example, eco-socialism. Ecological progress will only come when we overwhelm capital accumulation as the main goal of economy. And the perspective is a state and a community-controlled economy of sufficiency. Or, last example, industrialism criticism. We have only ecological progress when we will overcome industrialized structures and the corresponding deficient consumistic psychological structures. And the perspective in this point of view is yes, a more rural handicraft-based economy and communities with, for instance, a maximum range of 25 kilometers, economies with a maximum range of 25 kilometers for the most needed daily things. All these approaches are only represented by small group. You can imagine this. But some of the basic ideas spread into mainstream, partially. So the second basic approach, that's the opposite. That's, we call it modernization within the system. What protagonists of system change recognize as reasons for ecological crisis, we have to overcome. Here is a formidable precondition to master it. The utilization of capital, competition, globalization, constrained growth are, in this point of view, motivating forces, needed forces for basic green innovations and their worldwide diffusion. Examples, the technological strategies, efficiency and consistency. You all know these strategies, I'm sure. Without fostering these technology goals, without changing economical and political structures, distribution patterns and lifestyles. Or another example, the so-called thought direction, ecological modernization. Changing some adjustable screws in the political and economical system to gain an accelerated technical innovation. And yes, the Green New Deal, changing some more adjustable screws, some core directions of environmental, financial, and distribution policies as well, but all changes are remaining within the system. I will speak about this later. Okay, the last basic approach for a societal way out of ecological crisis is this, a phase change with open exits, so we name this. This line of thought can be understood as a synthesis of the previous two. Drastic transitions are thought to be necessary, but without totally rejecting steering mechanisms and structural features of modern societies. For instance, the capital accumulation should be domesticated and market embedded in political structures. Growth dynamics should be culturally limited. Representation should be complemented with participative structures. In a certain way, it is a recombination of existing elements of system criticism and system affirmation. Some examples. The idea of green modernity. Modernity and its criticism added or embedded. Industry and small and decentralized production. Or indirect representation structures, elections for instance, and direct participation structures, direct democracy structures. Policy and so-called sub-policy. Or another example, reproductivity. This approach, economy is saw as a whole economy, not only the so-called productive economy, the money-driven economy, but also the reproductive economy, subsistential work, non-profit work, communitary forms of work. Another approach is the cultural change to green market. I think that's what Nico Pech yesterday evening is talking about too. A cultural change bottom up. A green consumer is meeting a green producer and a green enterpriser, sometimes in one person, in the person of the prosumer. And the social ecological regulation of the capitalism. In history, we can differentiate different forms of regulation of the capitalistic system, different distribution schemes, intervention forms, the state intervention forms, social paradigms, accumulation structures, and so on. And the idea is that we need a new regulation scheme beyond the Fordism and beyond the neoliberalism. What this means, I will explain later. I only want to highlight these ideas in short now. So all these ideas of a new phase with an open exit could be part of a Green New Deal too. And all these new phases could lead to a bigger, it's not convincing me, could lead to a bigger transformation, to a system change. We cannot know now. It's an open exit. So now I will tell you some more detailed about the Green New Deal. You see here the cover of a policy paper made by the so-called Green New Deal group, a group containing scientists, green politicians, journalists, and so on. Yes, that's another cover from a German version on the way to the Green New Deal. It's relatively similar to the previous paper from the Green think tank Heinrich Böll Stiftung and World Watch Institute. So the basic ideas are the following. A renewal of the domestic and international financial system, including a changed regime of taxation. And second, the state intervention should lead to higher public and private expenditures targeted on environmental projects. And third, any public spending should be targeted so that the domestic companies benefit, and then the wages generated create further spending on consumer goods and services. A growth strategy with environmental projects. And this Green New Deal wants to replicate the original New Deal in the 1930s. The three major planks of this original New Deal are strict regulation of the cause of the problem that was in that time a greedy and feckless financial sector, just as today. Second, the provision of funding for infrastructure. And third, the investment of billions of dollars in a wide range of infrastructural projects, such as highways, dams and bridges in that time. Today, these infrastructural projects are smart grids and renewables. And its purpose was to get people back to work and generate new business opportunities. That was the historical New Deal. Yes, and it's relatively similar to these basic ideas of the Green New Deal. A changed regime of regulation, of regulating the financial system. And state intervention to foster public and private expenditure, and a growth strategy to create further spending on consumer goods and services. Today, these goods are green technologies. Yes, and these are some methods. They apply for giving subsidies for owners of buildings and companies, for instance, financed by state bonds, by a CO2 tax, by CO2 certificates, emission trading systems, or these are only examples, pension funds which are oriented in green investment with a public guarantee. They see this as an alternative for financial investment. They say, even if the hardest of times materialize as the triple crunch begins to bite, the triple crunch, that's financial crisis, ecological crisis, climate crisis, and the crisis of high oil prices, the crisis of high price for fossil fuels. Then it seems a reasonable supposition that for the private sector, clean technology is going to be a relative safe haven. And the idea is to create new jobs and business. Millions of jobs can be created. They write, thousands of new and existing business and services will benefit, and a large increase of tax revenue will be generated for the government. That's the idea to steer the economy in a Keynesianistic way. But that's not only an idea for new regulation of finance sector and for fostering green investments. They also laying out a social component. They write part of these increased revenues what need to be used to raise benefits for the poorest people in our society, who would otherwise be too adversely affected by such price rises during the transition to a low-carbon future. In a similar way, in the German study on the way to a Green New Deal, the scientists wrote, thus internalization of environmental costs can lead to prices which exclude the poorer. Therefore, we need mechanisms protecting the poorer, for instance, by a tariff system which reduces the prices for a basic supply and raises them for higher consumption. Or they get eco coupons in case of environmentally friendly behavior. That is a proposal from Prince Charles. So it sounds a little bit funny, but yes, I think he made it seriously. Yes, a Green New Deal, they write, contains more than new technologies or new accounting systems. It has directly to increase wealth, for instance, by generating green jobs. And ecologizing the economy especially means to raise capacities in research, general and vocational education, to ensure scientific knowledge and sufficiently qualified workforce. So that's the idea of this Green New Deal, to renew a capitalistic regulation scheme. For this regulation scheme in industrialized countries, with its continuously rising mass production, struggled in the 70s. Not only through problems of financing the expanding welfare state, furthermore increasing costs for the usage of natural resources. For instance, during the oil crisis in 1973, the prohibition of deterioration of the environment or its restoration occurred, rising costs. And the post-Fordism regulation scheme of, we call it neoliberalism, neither the structural problems of working world nor those of the societal relationship to nature could be solved in a sustainable way. And indeed, the questions of environmental protection are being more often considered since the 80s in this phase of neoliberalism. They have become part of the new regulation scheme, but environmental policies have only been integrated into the political economy in consensus with the basic neoliberal ideas of privatization, deregulation, and along with the so-called liberal productivism. And environmental protection should not endanger growth and competition. Thus, companies are given few restrictions or taxations, since the end products should not become too expensive. Okay, today it's clear to a critical public that this neoliberalism, this deregulated finance markets and so on, has not only fostered economical crisis, but has also prevented a better handling of ecological questions. For instance, a globalized production by forced deregulation, increases energy consumption through the transportation process, or the domination of the financial markets is leading capital flows to short-term profits instead of development of sustainable production processes. And the third, social polarization is undermining the willingness to a fair sharing of ecological burdens. So both regulation schemes, both historical regulation schemes, were no longer able to generate continuous growth. And as an answer to both economical and ecological crisis, the idea of a Green New Deal now becomes hegemonic. It's not only the idea of a Green Party or Green scientists. The basic ideas in the brains of nearly every politician, they name it in another way, but it's the same idea. For instance, in the EU Commission, they have these ambitious targets. They want to cut the emission 80 to 95% by 2050. And they want the same, to use the same method. State intervention to foster higher private expenditure. They say efficiency, including in electricity use, must become a profitable business in itself, leading to a robust internal market for energy-saving techniques. And a wide framework for resource efficiency would increase such savings. And as they call it, for a changed realm of taxation. Innovative and carefully considered uses of taxation and pricing should also be explored as tools to encourage behavioral changes or to fund investments. But they have also a social component. They say, however, safety nets are necessary in the case of vulnerable consumers. And overall, it's a green growth strategy. The energy policy, they write, is a key contribution for achieving the objective of the new strategy for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. That's the European Commission strategy. Very similar to the idea of the Green Deal. Okay, what is the social core of this idea? The deal itself, yes, we can say the social contract. In the Green New Deal of the main version, the deal consists of the creation of new green jobs, connected with an empowerment of employees who are thrown out of the old dirty industries, or who might be. And through increasing expenditures in general and vocational education, those threatened with exclusion should be newly included in the working world. However, the social question as a question of redistribution is considered as nearly solved, since the historically perfected, finished New Deal. And therefore, the introduction of a green market through taxation of usages of environment, for instance CO2 emissions, when you pollute different environmental sources, taxation of resource consumption and so on. Only a few measures to reduce particular hardships the very poor will be afflicted with. Okay, that's the deal in the main version. But Green New Deal is not Green New Deal. There are different conceptions of its social core, as well as different ideas of economic growth. And we can differentiate three basic Green New Deals, three basic ideas of a Green New Deal. And the first is this, the main version. And the second, I will shortly show you, is this, a social, we call it a social Green New Deal, fostered by trade unions and by left parties. And yes, it's relatively similar. First, the idea is similar. A state-driven future investment. The ETUC, that's the European Trade Union Confederation. Right, the EU must implement a European recovery plan matched with a green and social New Deal, equivalent to 1% of Europe's GDP, to stimulate employment, investments and growth. Europe needs massive investments in clean technologies. That's the classic Green Deal idea. They say public authorities, regulations and public budgets are crucial for public investment in infrastructure modernization and the diffusion of technologies to the south. And strong employment policies in education, training and long life learning frameworks promoting green and decent jobs. It's even relatively similar to the idea of Green New Deal, the main version. But this is now different. Redistribution of work and wealth. They say a transition of the energy system based on social justice would require a broad set of measures in many fields, notably a redistributive and graduated taxation on income and wealth, strong public services, which ensure universal access to energy, social tariffs and more. Redistribution of work and wealth, that's the social Green New Deal. And fostering internal consumption. What we need is extending the internal consumption demand and the therefore needed employment. The German Left Party wrote. And further, we need political interventions to stabilize wages and mass incomes. For instance, minimum wages or 30 hours working week and taxation of high incomes and properties. And that's, yes, that's the social core of this, that we call social Green New Deal. The difference is the role of the redistribution of work and income. And the redistribution should concurrently foster internal demand. And this should be financed by higher taxation of the rich and of business. But these social Green New Deal from the left and the unions, as well as the Green New Deal main version from the Greens and the EU and so on, are searching, both are searching for economic growth as a solution for both economical and ecological crises. And now I will show you a third, that's the last version. It's this study from the Wuppertal Institute for Climate and Environmental Policy. I think most of you know this institute. And yes, they published this study, Sustainable Germany in a Globalized World. And yes, I will show you some topics of this study. It begins with well-known methods, with methods of the Green New Deal, mandatory regulations. That's what I call the state method. For instance, energy-saving ordinance or eco-design guidelines. And they even want to foster these economic instruments, the market method of the environmental policy. For instance, to strengthen the EU emission trade system or the CO2 tax. That's normal Green New Deal idea. But the third is another, to promote low consumption lifestyles. I named this the preaching method, with ideas like less is more, simplify your life, reduce to the max, or yes, as Nico Pech named it, liberation from excess. And that's yes, the idea for a good life without growth. They write sustainability means privately turning to an economy which is able to ensure a good life for all citizens without continuous growth. And yes, how could we reach these political economy? By sharing and participating. They write participation means also sharing. Participation means to be involved in political processes. And participation, yes, is a high hegemonical idea in contemporary society. But they say participation means also sharing in combination with the sufficient financial security for all, a policy of work, fair sharing will overcome the old growth policy, will overcome societal inequality and disintegration. That's the socio-economical basis for ecological and social sustainable society. Sharing and participating, redistribution of working time. The idea is short, full time for all, and redistribution of income, increasing lower incomes and taking from the richer. That's similar to the social Green New Deal, the first two issues. But the third and the fourth are special for this thinking direction. Decoupling social security from gainful employment with a basic, to gain a basic social security. For instance, the idea of an unconditional basic income grant. To make it possible to try other forms of life. And yes, more non-profit work. For instance, subsistential work or community work. And they say we need a new societal contract, a new social contract. They write, in the rich world, citizens and their role as businessmen as well as consumers should give off capital and comfort power both to the nature and to those who are less well off. I think that's the core of this idea, the social contract, the social core of the deal. People in the North, respectively the global group of consumers. There are not only the people in the north, the global group of high consumers living everywhere in the world should change their lifestyle towards sufficiency, towards frugality, instead of extending the previous welfare model with green technologies. And in opposition to the versions with growth, the Green New Deal versions with growth, the question of redistribution is posed here because the authors have a different thesis concerning the consistency, the compatibility of sustainability or renewables and economic growth. This could be, they say, okay, that's not possible to have never-ending economic growth, even with renewables. And so we have to look for another society, another culture, and redistribution of wealth. And this could be described as a social Green New Deal beyond growth. Okay, I come to the end. First, I talked about some basic ideas for the right societal ways out of ecological crisis. And then I showed you 3 versions of a Green New Deal. And in all of these versions, these basic ideas are involved, less or more. And the main Green New Deal versions, the idea of ecological modernization are dominant, without changing too much societal structures. But especially in the 3rd version, the ideas of a phase change with an open exit. We cannot know to which structure of society this will lead in the end. With an open exit are integrated in the 3rd version of Green New Deal. And even these system criticism ideas I mentioned at first are partially integrated, partially, not in total. There's no system hopping. But there's the idea of a new phase with an open exit. So I hope I could give you an introduction in these topics of sustainability and society. I think it's enough for the debate beyond technology issues. Yes, and I think it's your turn now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ulrich, for presenting us the Green New Deal and the intricacies involved in different versions of Green New Deal. Thank you. Now we open the session for the audience. Any questions?
So I kind of want to talk about Google for a bit. You know, Google.com. So like for their employees, they have one day, Friday I think, where they give that one day for the employees to work on their own projects. That's kind of like, you know, giving you that free time in a sense. Like you have that part-time and then it's just like explore and do whatever. But in this case, it is in the context of still being within that company. And so like whatever you create during that free time, they capture this, that innovation, that invention, whatever comes out of it, which could be very, very, you know, lucrative for the company. Now, this creativity that comes from free time can be a very, very big driver. And like this free time allows you to, you know, you could do whatever you want. You could just like look at YouTube videos and stuff, but also like gain social access. Now, capturing this surplus is something that society wants to do in governments, right? Instead of like giving this surplus profit to this company, you want it to go out and let that be a social driver, social innovation. But the Googles want to keep that for themselves, right? They kind of want to keep the long work hours so that, you know, they have the dedication of the employees. So I don't, how can you maintain this, the job market and this free time social market? Are you trying to diversify, like separate the job market in a two-tier system? In a sense, one for the social and one for the financial?
So I should answer the questions immediately, or we should sample?
No, you can just start answering.
So I don't give you a detailed idea how to organize the work market. In the third version, the Green Deal Beyond Growth, there is an idea of dividing in a money-driven working market and a money-free working sphere. And in this sphere, of course, ideas could come, but the main point is that these are ideas of another life, not ideas, not convincingly ideas which you could make to money. Yes, ideas of a more sufficient life. People should feel this possibility. That's the basic idea. And the social mechanism is that there is, of course, a normal economy, normal market economy, where the people are working for money, and with this money, these social sphere can be financed. And whether the ideas from this social sphere will be integrated in business structures, I cannot say this.
Okay, next one.
Thank you, Ulrich, for a very interesting presentation. My question is about the example you gave regarding the fundamental system change. You mentioned that the economy should be limited to 25-kilometer radius, but is it a result of some research or something? Because, like, economies like Germany or Netherlands, which are very energy intensive, and I don't think that they can, like, collect the required resources within this small area. So how realistic is this?
Yes, it's only an idea of a special group with a special criticism on reasons for the ecological crisis, and their focus and their critics is the industrial structure, and thus they have an idea to organize economy mostly in this area. It's not a result of scientific research. I'm only referring ideas, basic ideas. But you find these groups, when you look around, when you go into the country, you find these groups with these ideas. And I think some of this idea are spread into main ideas. The idea that we should additionally have small economies in our region, local economies, and so on. And this comes from this basic idea. You cannot perform it in total. That's clear in a modern society. And you cannot produce a laptop in such an economy. But as an additional idea, it comes into practice.
Hello, it's my turn. Over here.
Oh yes.
So I really like the third idea of the Green New Deal, Beyond Growth. But I'm just,
totally makes sense to me, but I'm just asking myself, like, how present is this idea of the Green New Deal in the political sphere? Like, is it discussed at all? I mean, not even left parties are sticking to the growth paradigm, it seems. And what would be your idea to propel this idea of the third Green New Deal beyond growth? Or is it at all possible in our democracy of 4 years changes and very short-term thinking, and like, how can we implement it?
Difficult questions. We all have to answer it. But my first thought on this problem is that we must have two phases to make this idea hegemonic. The first phase is bottom up. That's what Nico Pech is preaching. So you can start with another kind of life and bring this idea to society. But how can we expect that this idea will be successful in a society which is high shared into rich and poor? How can we expect that this idea will be successful in a society with high domination structures, where I cannot express myself in work, for instance? So we have to look for changing these structures. That's phase number 2, and structures which will enable the so-called good life. For instance, one of these structures is this guaranteed basic income grant. There are others. That's my favorite, but that's not important now here. We have to. We have to foster political good conditions for the good life of the individuals, and that's indeed a long process. But yes, every present institution have been in the past only utopic ideas. Yes. These ideas are relatively covering a small share of critical thinking. We just start with this.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. I have a very similar question, or a question in a very similar direction. Whatever change you or last night, Igor, for example, were addressing, I would like to know what is your favorite candidate to address the change first. I don't mean this as a person, I more mean this as what kind of theory do you have behind addressing the candidate? I name a candidate to make it clearer. A candidate for the left wing, for many years, used to be the political system. So this is the main target group to address for change. Then, for example, as we learned yesterday night, Nico has a different direction to address. He's mainly, not purely, but mainly addressing the individual. If we come with a more sophisticated background theory on society, there would be, to my understanding, even an additional candidate, very promising, and this is the organization of organizations. And this is my question. So it's in a way two-folded. What are the preferable candidates to address for any kind of change you have in mind? And second, how do you refer this, how do you relate this to what kind of theory?
Yes, that's difficult. I think to highlight the addressing of organization, that's a little bit the same mistake we would make when we only would address the political system, or we would only address the individual. In my point of view, I come from the regulation theory, it's a socio-economical theory. all these subsystems of society are interlinked, so, and we cannot address only one privileged system. So I cannot answer this question.
Okay. Hello, you're far away. I was wondering, sounds so nice theory, but we have seen quite a substantial loss of green jobs, for instance, in the photovoltaic industry. I think probably you could attribute it to the globalization effect and the global competition. How does the Green New Society, or the social Green New Society, cope with such a challenge? Do we close our markets, or how do we do it?
I think there are different answers. I showed you one answer from these trade unions and left parties. They say, okay, we have to foster the internal consumption, the international consumption. And then there's enough money and the people can, there's enough money in our country and the people can demand green new technologies, and then we want to create new jobs for this. To replace these jobs which disappear in the globalized world. That's one strategy, and the other is the third version, to accept that I cannot maintain this high these high earnings and these high wages and this growth, and that I have to think about other ways to happiness. For instance, only working 20 hours or 25, and making the other.
So they haven't had huge lines built to them, but they're building a lot of solar on their barns, which have very large roofs.
So that's only the idea, and the people have to decide by themselves. So.
But how do you change the economy when you work 25 hours a week? I mean, the experience from women working part-time, I think, speaks for itself. That you don't, if you're not the boss, how do you make the change? And if you're working 25 hours a week, you probably not be the boss.
Okay, that's a problem. What is with higher positions? So you cannot be a half-time counselor. Okay, but that's a decision of the people themselves, I think. And in this idea, they have to decide what is more worth, the money or the free time. And if a big share of society is deciding this question with free time, so it's good for the ecology too. That's the basic idea. But it's clear that it's not a demand to everybody. That's more the idea of left parties and the trade unions, that I make it obligatory for everybody, 30 hours a week or whatever, 25 hours a week. And in the third version, I give this question to the individual, but sustained by a political regulation that it's giving this individual idea a good chance, a good atmosphere for trying out new forms of living. As for instance, by the social security, which is not depending on your previous income.
My question is actually, I just wanted to, you talked about fundamental system change. Now, this system has been with us for the past 100 years, and institutions have been developed actually to support the system, and it's actually very difficult to challenge it. And the only thing that you talked about is the system to be criticized. Now, my question is, who has to lead the change of the system, and is it feasible?
When I get you right, you ask me who has the task to change the system, or who can do it? Or?
Yeah, actually, who has to lead it? Who has to lead the change of the system?
Yes, that depends on the theory. So all the theories I gave you are not convincingly my theories. I just want to give you an overlook to these theories. But yes, these system change approaches, that's different. For instance, the eco-socialism idea, they say, okay, we have to hope to get the majority in the state and then changing this. And for instance, another system change idea, the domination criticism, they say, okay, we have to start with small groups and in these small groups we have to figure out and to try out other ways of living and showing this to the public and showing that it's possible to live without domination structures. We are all equal, and with these structures we are consuming less environment. Only two examples, but that depends on the idea, which is yes, the favorable agent in this process.
Can I, for example, try to not to answer the question, but to comment on the question? I think we first have to identify what you see or what you observe with a kind of theory. But if you do this, then secondly, you have to accept what kind of premises you want to still keep. If you want to keep or stick to the realm, for example, of democracy, then the question is completely different. When you, for example, say, and there are still some people indirectly who argue with what they call, for example, analog Manhattan project to change the world. If you in detail look for such an urgent case to change world order in favor of a less carbonized world, you will see this is not in line with democracy. So the only answer I can give you, probably, only your direction, you have to very analytically analyze the society, and then you have to decide where you start. And for sure, it will take a long, long time. So there is no such thing as an individual, to my understanding, who can be a candidate for a change like this. And it's very critical, and this is my belief, it's very, very sensitive if you apply only towards the political system. Since with a highly individualized society, at least in huge parts of the world, it is very tricky to get rid of this. So you have to maintain between these two stages. You will address the individual, but I would very much favor to look in the direction of organizations, since they might have an interest, or you might have the chance to push and pull some aspects of ecological society through organizations. This is another task. There are some studies in this area. So no answer, but critical. If you look at an individual, I think you will never hop out of a niche. And secondly, if you rest on the political system, you have to be very sensitive to the issue of democracy.
Any more questions?
I also kind of want to comment on your comment. So, like, I definitely also see the potential in looking into organizations as the vehicles for change. But there are certain organizational cultures that are very parasitic. For instance, on economic downtimes, there are these lawyer corporations that buy patents, and then when things get better again, they sell these patents for ridiculous profit. So these parasitic company cultures, organizations, they survive because they make money. In our legal systems, we allow these companies to have human rights. We treat them like they're humans, but they live forever as long as they live. And so, it's also like there also are bad humans too, and this is like in our biology. We have greediness and all that stuff, all the sins. And these organizations that do survive, they just have like this evolutionary robustness. So like, I guess a question to like maybe the audience and everybody is like, at least we need some kind of integration in the political system to recognize these things and make the proper investments in our daily work, and our fruits and labor. Because like something I said earlier in like an earlier conversation was that the government's goal is if there's an investment opportunity where the payback is 200 years from now, but it's the best investment ever, you get 50% returns year after year, the government should invest somehow through some kind of mechanism. But that choice is kind of like a trade-off.
Yes, that was an interesting conversation. Dr. Ulrich, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think I've had time enough, and it's enough for the debate, for further debate.
Yeah.
Even if we are now a little bit tired and should have a break.
Okay, so any more
But
questions?
I stay here today evening. If anybody wants to discuss with me, yes.
Okay.
It's more a comment than a question. For me, I see the Green New Deal idea, all these ideas, you present all these 3 or even more sub-ideas as ways to link many issues together and to try to get an overall concept. And we see that we have many interlinkages between different subsystems of society and economy and everything. And I'm always a bit careful with like overall concepts if they are developed in small, let's say, small communities. Because we see this Green New Deal, it's only maybe it's a big community, it's a sustainability community, but we develop an overall concept for the whole society, for the whole world. With discussing maybe we had the question who to address. Is it the political system, is it the individual, maybe organizations? And we see, we have to address everybody. We have to address individuals, we have to address the political system, we have to address organizations, and we are only a small community. And I'm always a bit careful if a small community develops a concept for the world. So I think that we have many specific problems, and each of these problems has a solution or has many solutions, which creates new problems. And we have to be aware of all these interlinkages and to be aware of our maybe to be careful with developing concepts for the world without discussing them with everybody. And we can't discuss it with everybody, so we should keep in mind that maybe we don't have the perfect concept for solving anything.
But if I have the chance to answer, I will give a short comment to this. This Green New Deal is not only an idea of a small group. it's a basic thinking line in a broad range of society. Only this small group is expressing this with the word, with the label Green New Deal, but the basic thoughts are widely spread. Just as it is with the historical New Deal, the idea to create new economic growth with higher wages and with state intervention. And this, yes, is important to know. It's not only a conspirative idea of a small group. It's a basic thinking line.
Whenever I hear of this, it's so very frustrating to talk about cost growth and about the implementation, because we already know that, at least for the climate issue, we don't have any time anymore, and we have to act. We have to act now. That's what everybody is saying. To achieve the 2-degree target, and what you have. There's so many different targets we have to reach now. And at the same time, this growth in the economy is always working against us. And then we don't even have a way for implementing a beyond growth strategy. It's so frustrating. I just wanted to.
But I think society will change in small steps.
Yeah, but it's small.
Important in which direction these steps are made. We cannot accept that we have a system hopping from today to Monday morning. So,
just from an educational view, most of the time, you get a lot of participation and a lot of favor from a big group when you talk about a grand vision, like something like a theory. But usually it's like these little screws that are really, really difficult, and nobody can have time and focus and a job to fix these things. So how would you create an organization that attempts to do it, from your experience?
What's the question? How?
Just okay, business as usual is Merkel organizes a bunch of experts and they just talk together and just writes a report that nobody reads. What would you do different?
Can you try to read again?
Oh, so in a normal political system, you just have thousands of these reports that nobody reads. So would you, if you want to have more engagement with the community?
We can only start to discuss this point and hope that these points will spread into society, not only by theory, that's clear, not only by education, but even by practice. So that's the experience with all new historical regulation regimes. It's a combination of the practice and the theory. If I can explain the seen practice, the lived praxis with good theory, then it comes clearly to the brains of people, and there's some development in such a direction. Combination of practice and theory.
Okay, that will be the last question.
Okay. Yesterday I asked Nico Pech about the Bedingung zu Grundeinkommen, basic income, and you actually just referred to it as your personal idea of change that would help us to actually overcome our environmental problems. Nico Pech said that he has two things he doesn't like about the basic income. The one is that it would increase or stabilize consume, and the other one is that it would diminish the incentive of being proud of what you do, basically. So this argument, what would you say against that?
I discussed this with Nico several times, and yes, I think it depends on how we finance this unconditional basic income grant. If we will finance it with eco-taxes, we don't foster consumption with this basic income. We break consumption if we make environmental consumption more expensive. And the other argument is that yes, with this basic income, there we have a friendly surrounding for experiences, for new experiences, for new deconsumptive experiences. And these are the two the two tools which ensures the introduction of basic income, that this will lead us to the growth and not to more growth. It depends on the financing.
Thank you.
Yeah.